So I've been reading Iron John by Robert Bly, and it's a decent enough book. But he's gone on to talking about war, and he's began by presenting a passage spoken in 1465 by a French knight by the name of Jean de Brueil. So this French knight says, "Battle is a joyous thing. We love each other so much in battle. If we see that our cause is just, and our kinsmen fight boldly, tears come to our eyes. A sweet joy rises in our hearts, in the feeling of our honest loyalty to each other, and seeing our friend so bravely exposing his body to danger in order to fulfill the commandment of our Creator. We resolve to go forward and die or live with him on account of love. This brings such delight that anyone who has not felt it cannot say how wonderful it is. Do you think someone who feels this is afraid of death? Not in the least. He is so strengthened, so delighted, that he does not know where he is. Truly, he fears nothing in this world." So that's an incredible chivalrous passage, and really puts on show the gallant glory of war. War before an inception of certain wars and events. So he goes on, this is Robert Bly now. He says, "Here we see the lover and the warrior mingling, but that mingling is now mostly gone. The physical warrior disintegrated into the soldier when mechanized warfare came on. Some people believe that the conscious warrior and his ideals ended during the American Civil War's last battles, which amounted to a slaughter. He goes on to say anything left of the warrior vanished with the mass bombings of Dresden, etc. So, there's three specific key historical points I want to highlight there. The mass bombings of the Second World War, Dresden, the inception of mechanized warfare, which Robert Bly prescribes as the end of the warrior into the soldier, and the American Civil War's last battles. So, I think that's a fascinating selection of events, because when we look back at history, a wise man has said in the past that it's not all about remembering specific dates and names. It's about learning the patterns, learning the powers, learning the past as a window into the future, and this type of thing. Bigger picture, more important lessons than, just memorizing some names and dates. And these events are huge because, in my mind, if it's as stark as this, that there was chivalrous, gallant warfare through all of human history until now, until these recent events, then nothing can understate their importance and what a transition this is. It's huge because I think that it points to something for our time and something for the future, and where things will go from here. Now, these events came about in a time where an Imperium became possible. Right now, for the first time in history, the world has been so connected, the nations have been so connected, the communication has never been easier. This is the first time in history we've had the opportunity for a total Imperium. Now, what do I mean by a total Imperium? There's a lot of conversations that happen in our sphere of how things should be ran, what should happen next, what should be done about this or that talking point, key issue, topic. And most of this is navel gazing for the simple reason that we are not in power. But we could be in power. And I think we will be in power. And when I say we, I mean our kinsfolk, people who have the interests of our kinsfolk at heart, which I do not believe the current crop of string pullers do have the interests of the people at heart. It's became very evident in recent years that the most important thing for political progress in the direction that we want it, the most important thing is getting our hands onto the levers of power and taking the infrastructure or the establishments of our forefathers. Now, these are in parasitical hands. And when I say parasitical, I'll highlight, for example, the leaders of the current Slavic War, where Russian and Ukrainian Slavic men on both sides are being willed to die by their leaders. I truly don't believe Putin cares for Russians, and I don't believe that Zelensky cares for Ukrainians. I in fact believe that Zelensky hates Ukrainians and Putin hates Russians, those people, his underlings, who he wills to die on the battlefield. And why would this be? I think that the reason that they will their own to die is because they have no love for their own. They have no care for their own. They have interests that lie elsewhere.
The First World War taught the new class of international bankers and industrialists a very simple lesson. War is good for business. Take, for instance, Remington. We tend to associate their name with typewriters, but actually they made most of the rifles and handguns used during the Great War, and made a colossal fortune in the process. The banks, in their turn, lapped this up because it meant that defence contractors were having no trouble repaying the huge loans they had outstanding, and, best of all, the world's richest nations had had to borrow huge sums from the merchant bankers in the first place to finance the war, the Americans and the British just as much as the Germans. And they would now be repaying these loans to the banks for decades to come at a steep rate of interest. For international merchant bankers, the Rothschilds in particular, the First World War had been a gift from heaven. And people watching this should ask themselves a simple question before passing judgment. Supposing you were in business during that war and the contract you had with the government to supply the troops with tin hats or boots or uniforms or gunpowder was netting you millions every year in profit. And then one day the war ended and your money stopped completely. What do you think your attitude to war might be?
So, back to the point. A sequence of events in modern history, the American Civil War, the mass bombings of World War II, and the inception of mechanized warfare, made war a completely different thing from what it was throughout all of history prior. And this is a big jump for the mind of the warrior to make, whose instincts are passed down generation on generation, father through father, and lead him to remain a warrior today as his blood crowned him. Now, these men have a very hard time coming away from the idea that war is still is no longer virtuous, chivalrous, gallant, glorious. But in fact, it is not. It is a tool used by the parasite class to cull the strong, the noble, the beautiful, the threats, the power threats to their reign. If you volunteer your blood only to pit yourself against other noble blood for a war that's cause you don't know or support, you are a useful idiot. You are at war with the wrong people. You've heard the enemy's call, the conscriptor, and he called you to war with your brother, be it a Slav, a German, an Englishman, an American. These are your brothers. But the conscriptors, the warmongers, the politicians, the string pullers, your true enemies, have called you to a war with your brother. And you took heed to their call. You ran to live or die at their will. And in this choice, you have lost the real war. You've lost the war of knowing your enemy. You've lost the war within. You've lost the war of knowing your friend. We are in a time where Imperium is possible. That is why they are creating wars. They profit from the wars, and they profit from your death and the deaths of the lives that you take. That is their victory. And that is the fall of your people. If you sacrifice your warrior blood to fighting the wrong enemy, you are fighting for your enemy, you are killing your friends, and you are risking your own progeny in the decision. So I will not say that you are wrong to fight in a current war, but I will ask you to think again. Ezra Pound's Hugh, Selwyn, Mauberley, which is a reflection on World War I. Part 4. These fought in any case, and some believing pro domo in any case. Some quick to arm, some for adventure, some from fear of weakness, some from fear of censure, some for love of slaughter, in imagination, learning later, some in fear, learning love of slaughter. Died some pro patria, non dulce, non et decor, walked eye deep in hell, believing in old men's lies, then unbelieving, came home to a lie, home to many deceits, home to old lies and new infamy, usury age-old and age-thick, and liars in public places, daring as never before, wastage as never before, young blood and high blood, fair cheeks and fine bodies, fortitude as never before, frankness as never before, delusions as never told in the old days, hysterias, trench confessions, laughter out of dead bellies. There died a myriad, and of the best among them, for an old bitch gone in the teeth, for a botched civilization, charm smiling at the good mouth, quick-eyed, gone under earth's lid, for too gross of broken statues, for a few thousand battered books.